approaching Hoover Dam, so I think we can start talking. First, let's talk about this JK. This JK is a 2008 X Unlimited. It had virtually no options except for the hardtop, and it's four-wheel drive. This JK has a 2009 LH6 5.3 in it. The LH6 is an all-aluminum 5.3 with AFM. AFM, or DOD, is displacement on demand or air fuel management. Basically, it just shuts four cylinders off under a light load so that it saves fuel. Does it work? Yeah, kind of. On a light JK that's driven lightly, you might see some improvement. On a lot of our swaps, we turn off the AFM. Okay, we're going over Hoover Dam right now. This is the bypass, so you can't see very much. You can still go to the dam, but this route saves quite a bit of time. So this JK has a 2009 LH6. When it comes to 5.3s, there's basically two different variations. There's the aluminum and the cast iron engines, and those have two different variations. There's the flex fuel and the non-flex fuel engines. Prior to 2010, the two aluminum engines were the LC9 and the LH6. They're basically the same engine, except the LC9 is flex fuel. It has bigger injectors. Same thing with the cast iron engines. One was flex fuel and one wasn't, the LY6 and the LM7. So up till 2009, any of the 5.3s make a good donor engine. They do not have variable valve timing, which the 2010 and newer 5.3s have. Is the VVT worth spending extra money for? I don't think so. I've driven a lot of each, and really, as far as the performance goes, I don't notice very much. The earlier engines have higher compression. The later engines have VVT. I don't notice that much of a difference in economy. If anything, I think the earlier engines get better economy than the later engines. So I would not go out of my way to try to find a VVT engine. Starting in 2010, they dropped the LH6 and now just have the LC9 and the LMG, which is the cast iron version. And they make excellent engines also, either one. Remember, if you are subject to emissions, you do need to get an engine that's the same year or newer than your vehicle. And if you have a California certified vehicle, the engine has to be a California certified engine. Now we can talk about the rest of this Jeep. I bought it in Greenville, Texas, as a test mule. I'll explain the reasons why I ended up purchasing this, because I already had purchased a 2009 Rubicon new in California. Went to Greenville, Texas, picked this up. It had no options other than the hardtop. It was a manual transmission. It was four-wheel drive. It basically was going to be the test mule, the prototype, to put an LS in a JK and see if it will work. I've been doing engine swaps for 30 years, and it's pretty easy to throw a small block in a truck or Toyota old technology, but the JK being CAN bus driven and all the electronics and ABS and ESP, this really was going to be the prototype. And it turned out so well that this Jeep, all these years later, has accumulated many, many miles and is driven on a daily basis. This Jeep has been around the country a couple of times through Death Valley. I had it in Death Valley when it was 122 degrees with my wife and baby, and it has the original radiator, the 3.8 liter radiator, and it's the original radiator. It has 115,000 miles on it, and it still ran cool. So it's pretty impressive what the 5.3 can do in a JK. So this Jeep is a 2008 manual transmission JKU X, and we changed it to an automatic. It appears and functions just like stock. We do a lot of manual to automatic swaps. The only thing you're going to be missing is this prindle on the dash. You're not going to have the prindle on the dash if you go from a manual to an automatic unless you change the ECM or the PCM and the engine harness. Then it will activate the prindle on the dash. But as far as the shift interlock, brake interlock, key interlock, lights on the shifter, park reverse, neutral, reverse lights, all that works just like it's supposed to. We have a separate electronics for the manual to automatic swap so that we can support it. So this Jeep has the original radiator, the original transfer case, the 241J. It has the original rear exhaust system and the Chevy Silverado front exhaust system, which we reworked to fit in here. A 5.3 with a 3.8 rear exhaust works well. It probably loses 10 or 15 horsepower over if you had high performance exhaust, but it is so quiet that, for instance, right now, all I can hear is tire noise and wind noise. I can't even hear the engine. It will make a little bit of noise when you get on it, a little bit of that V8 rumble, but it works well. I would not run that exhaust on a 6.0 or a 6.2. I think that they need to breathe a little bit better. So, moving back, we have the original transfer case, the original front and rear drive shafts, the original suspension. The suspension with an LS does not have to be changed. The engine transmission combo weighs about 45 pounds more than your 3.8, and that's really not a lot if you consider that most of that is centered towards the center of the vehicle. And if you take a 100-pound winch and put it in front of your front axle, that has much more effect on vehicle dynamics than this LS has. We keep the engine down low and as far back as we can, so there's virtually no difference between the handling of this vehicle and a stock 3.8, other than it has twice the horsepower. So this Jeep has almost all of its original equipment except for the engine and transmission. Now, to go back why I originally started with this 2008, I originally purchased a 2009 JKU Rubicon for my family. I had been driving a two-door Toyota with an LS in it, of course, and when I got married and decided to have kids, that wasn't going to work off-road, and I'd like to go off-road out here in Vegas quite a bit. So we bought this 2009 Rubicon, and while I love the Rubicon, it soon became apparent that it was a nightmare on the road. Right after we first purchased it, we were going to take a trip to New York and to see our friends, and we hit the road, left Vegas going north, through Salt Lake, and it was apparent by the time we hit St. George that that it wasn't going to be good. Speed limits in Utah can be 80 miles an hour, and this JK was struggling to hold 70, 75. It was fully loaded with gear in my family, and of course my wife is nagging to go faster, and the JK couldn't. It would downshift into third and then second, making me think that we're going to throw a rod, revving up, just very unpleasant. So I bring the speed down. Outside of Salt Lake, right going into Park City, we hit some mountains at 8,000 feet. The thing slowed down to about 55 miles an hour, and it was literally floored. The transmission was upshifting and downshifting so that it was revving up to 5,000 RPM. It wasn't pleasant at all. The speed with the cruise control on was hunting plus and minus 5 miles an hour. You'll notice that with your LS, you'll be plus or minus 1. And then I got pulled over by a cop just outside of Park City for going too slow, and he didn't write me. I explained to him the situation, and that was it.
GPS signal lost.
For me, I drive Corvettes, and everything I have pretty much has enough power to get out of its own way, but the rest of the trip to New York was a nightmare. I bought that vehicle for my wife, and she refused to drive it. She tried to do one leg in Virginia on the trip, and and had such a difficult time trying to merge into traffic, she refused to drive the vehicle. So when we got back to Vegas, the trip back was just as bad. Going through Texas in the 80-mile-an-hour zones with headwinds, we could barely hold 65, 70. The hood was fluttering, which isn't the fault of the engine, but that combined with the fact the engine was revving constantly, trying to keep the speed up. The gas mileage dropped dramatically. It just was a bad trip. So when I got back to Vegas, I had a choice: get rid of the Jeep, buy a Land Rover, or maybe put an engine in it. So I know some Jeep engineers that work in Troy, and they suggested that we go with a Hemi, and I seriously considered it. I had customers with Hemis back then, and we were fighting a lot of issues with overheating, calibration problems, check engine lights and emissions because of the patch calibrations, but mainly the overheating and having to cut the firewall and change the suspension out, and it just didn't seem to make sense to me. So I said, if I had a choice to put an engine in this chassis, probably my first choice would have been a high horsepower diesel engine like the 4-liter quad turbo Ford, but they're not available here. So being an LS fan, of course the aftermarket support, the drivability, the power, there's just so many advantages to an LS over any other engine out there today. I decided to go with the LS. So rather than take that Rubicon down, I decided to purchase a bare bones JK, and henceforth that's where this white 2008 came from. So we drove to, we rented a car, drove to Greenville, Texas, purchased this white JK, and drove it back. As soon as we got back, and this would have been early 2009, I tore it apart, put this 5.3 in, and the rest is history. I know this is getting a little bit long and drawn out, so I'm going to take a break here. But I do want you to see that we're cruising now at 67 miles an hour, 1,650 RPM, and it's as calm as can be. It is completely and absolutely different than the 3.8. Even going up and down these mountains, we're holding 6th gear. Sometimes we'll drop into 5th, but it's a completely different experience. And now I actually look forward to going onto the highway, where previously it was a nuisance. So I'll give this a break, and I'll come back and explain a little bit more about the JK. Thanks.